All right, Councilmember David Oh, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So the first thing I'd like to ask you about, and we asked one of your colleagues the exact same question. I'm just curious about your answer.
Yes.
What is it like to be in the minority on council?
Well, for the most part, it doesn't come up because when you're talking about setting aside funds for example, Parks and Rec, or dealing with a educational program, which is mostly we're doing like the bread and butter things of the city. We need to have the trash picked up. We need to, so that it doesn't come up much that way, but it does come up in two ways, which I think are, one is legitimate, and I think the other one is just bad politics. There are differences of opinion. I think they're really based on individuals, but sometimes they come from a perspective of more government or less government, and who is responsible for the governance, especially when it comes down to individual rights and responsibilities versus the government's ability to take on those issues. So the consequences of having individual rights and responsibilities versus the government doing it in hopefully ways that's beneficial, but reduces the consequences of making bad decisions, but also reducing your ability to make bad decisions. The second thing I think, though, is problematic because sometimes the idea is good, and it's something that the majority party would not do. But when I do it, it's almost like a test. And when it's popular, sometimes the bill will be voted down, and next year somebody will introduce a little watered down version of that bill. And I think that's problematic because we're trying to solve a critical problem, and we could have solved it in the best way, the clearest way possible. Now, I'm not saying everyone's voting it down because of majority versus minority, but I think that is a factor there. And in some cases, I know that it is, and it's pretty much said so. Like, it's a great idea, but we don't want to give it to a Republican because there's an overarching problem from that perspective that we don't want to credit a Republican with doing something good when we're basically saying Republicans do bad things. So we're going to vote this down, wait a little bit, introduce it ourselves, and try to pass it. But sometimes I think that when you try to just do something that somebody else did, to the extent that it looks good or sounds good, there isn't the full gamut of all the different parts that have to be impacted in order to get the good result. That's what I would say. For example, I think affordable housing is an issue for me because fundamentally, I believe that affordable housing should be built in neighborhoods that need affordable housing. That doesn't mean we can't do inclusionary housing in gentrified, wealthy neighborhoods, but I don't see that that is a good use of the money. Do some of it, but don't put everything into that because, number one, the housing that you're building, whether it's home ownership or rentals, are very expensive. And secondly, the people who live there, first of all, it's not that affordable. But when you live there, the cost of living is very high. And I think where I have a difference of opinion talking to people is you have to start with the idea that poor people want to live with rich people. And I just reject that idea. I hear from people who say like, well, the poor people will benefit from living with us rich people. And I think not. I think people like to live in a community where they're equal and where, the cost of living and access to the community is something that, they're not the lowest person on the totem pole. What I do think, however, is you have to improve the community. So someone said, well, rich people make schools better. I said, I haven't seen that. I have not seen a gentrified neighborhood that you have a better neighborhood school. You have private schools, you have magnet schools, you have some charter schools, but I have not seen that the local neighborhood school has gotten better. That is a different issue. The neighborhood schools should be improved. But if you could build affordable housing in neighborhoods in Southwest Philadelphia, for example, where I live, you would build more houses and you would need to improve the schools as well. But you would build more houses and you would use neighborhood skilled labor. And the houses cost less to build. So there will be more rental units and more residential units. There will be more people from the community working. And that's the other part. You have to make a commitment to using skilled labor. And now you might have an issue with the building trades or some unions, right? I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that becomes a problem. I think you have to try to alleviate a critical problem in the place where it is most necessary.
So from what you just explained and looking at it just from the outside, it almost sounds like in a way you're saying being in a minority, there's a little bit more freedom, but there's also less, right? Because
Yes.
you can do more things, but those things aren't likely to be implemented immediately.
True, or at all.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting bag. And when you talk about how, because there's an overwhelming Democratic majority on council, if they're less likely to see a Republican win, is that always been the case in council the way you see it, or has it been more just the last few years when it's been a little tougher to be a Republican?
I think it's worse. I think it's been worse in the past because of personality conflicts. I think in the past, like certain council members did not get along with each other in a very open way where they would openly speak ill of each other, in council chambers. And I think it's been less so for me when I first was elected and reelected. I think it is different now. I think it's because, we're just a more polarized country. We definitely have far more polarized politics. And certainly the divisiveness is much stronger. And, local politics is local. But in today's world, where so much of local politics is really presented through the lens of national politics, it's hard to escape that. But I think that, the good and the bad of it, as you said, is, since I'm not part of the majority, which is a very big majority, I'm a lot less constrained by considering what everybody else on the team thinks. The problem, as you've noted, is because I'm not on the team and I don't think about what everybody else thinks. Whatever I do, while maybe more substantively bold, is less likely to pass because I don't think about what everybody else is thinking about. And not just the council members, but their supporters and those folks. So when I think about education, I think about children. Then I think about teachers. Then I think about buildings. I think about communities. There's a lot of folks I'm not thinking about that are very important in this equation, all the stakeholders. And when I think about libraries, I think about the community and what they're accessing. So I have a very different view of what is important first. And to me, it's more simple. A school should be the same. We should not have this huge disparity in buildings, resources, programs, access to musical instruments, career training, safety that should not exist, technology. Same thing with libraries. You should not have libraries that are outdated and have nothing to offer young people. And, it's a matter of funding, like what we fund, but what are we providing? Why can we not provide games? Why can we not provide the software that you cannot afford on your own and make it? Why can't we lend in every community library musical instruments and things like that? I mean, I think we can. We just have not removed ourselves from that model. But the question is, why not? Why have we not, kind of changed? And I would say, quite frankly, that when the mayor cut the budget, it's a proposal to cut the budget. It is affirmed by council. So while we did not write the budget, cutting all that stuff like the libraries, council does vote for it. I voted against it. And a council member can introduce an amendment to amend the budget and then put money back into the libraries. But if you don't do that, to me, it's not, it's an issue that you're not willing to do that. I did do an amendment to refund the libraries, but that was defeated. So I think is part of the factor is I'm not on that team. I don't have to consider everything about like what the mayor wants and what the council members want and what the library advocates want and all. I just have to think about, well, here's money that's not spent in the budget. It's not identified. It's a unidentified over appropriation. I'm going to move that money to the libraries. Nobody has said what this money is for, and I'm going to put it back in the libraries. If you don't want it in the libraries, tell us what it's for. But that amendment is defeated. So I will not find out what it's for. But then 2 or 3 years later, someone says, oh, we should have libraries open 6 days a week. But I'm sorry, you voted against it. You voted to cut the budget. And I think that for me is something that I don't have to be worried about. And I can speak the way I just spoke, right? Which means I'm making some folks unhappy and then my bill will not pass.
So let's talk a little bit about the priorities for the fall session. And I'm sure some of these things are going to dovetail with what we just talked about.
Sure.
Yeah. So what are you looking at as some of your major issues coming into the fall?
Well, the biggest issue in our city is just wanton murder and the ridiculous nature of what these murders are. And just to clarify for your viewers, someone wants to kill somebody. They can't find that person. They look on their social media and they see a person in the same picture. They see that person waiting for a bus, so they run up on that person, they shoot them. And that's where we are. That person is not a criminal. That person is not involved in any way, did not participate in any, they're just simply in a photograph with somebody else. And this is the state that we're in when we're talking about young people murdering each other. And the fact that innocent people are shot is not a problem for them. This is a big problem. If people do not understand this problem, they are trying to solve something that they are really kind of misapplying themselves to. So murder of this nature, because there is a retaliation for that. The people shooting each other know who they are, and quite frankly, they are publicizing it with photographs, videos, and music and lyrics about why they did it, who did it, and what it was about. So it's that open. And I think for many people in the community, they find it very frustrating that somehow law enforcement cannot respond to the fact that it's kind of known who's doing what, why they're doing it. They're even saying so. Or for example, when a group of adults pulls up on a schoolyard and leaves almost 100 shells, a schoolyard, a playground of children. that cannot be acceptable. That should bring down the house in prosecution, in punishment. And, that's where we're going to differ. Some people will say, well, that's not the answer. I will say not doing that sends a very bad message, and that promotes this type of problem. So for me, yeah, that is the major problem, but I cannot address this like a mayor. I can only address it like a council person. And so I chair a committee that has to do with global opportunities and the creative, innovative economy. I don't chair a committee on public safety. What I can do, however, is introduce a resolution to have a hearing, and it's up to my colleagues to approve it. It won't be under my committee. It'll be under the Public Safety Committee. But specifically, since I pushed to appropriate $500,000 to immediately move mothers who are being shot at for months and more than a year, because it's perceived in the community that their children cooperated with law enforcement, at least that is the excuse. We set aside this $500,000 and specifically said, this is to move these women before they are murdered. And also to send the message that we are going to care for those whose lives are in danger. And we certainly want to let people know that if you are a witness to a crime, you can cooperate. We will be there in every way possible to protect you and your families. But unfortunately, to my knowledge, none of this money has been spent for these mothers. And what I need to know, because I've heard that $300,000 was sent to the district attorney's office. Well, the district attorney has money for witness relocation. This is not witness relocation. This is relocating people who are not witnesses to a crime. They are simply related to someone, and therefore they're being shot at and assaulted. So from there, we can go into why are we not able to move people, for almost 2 years now. Their houses have bullet holes in them. They live in the neighborhood where areas in our city that have been identified as hotspots where young people are hunting each other, driving around the block 2-3 cars at a time. And why is it that this can happen out in the open? Is there not ability to use drone technology to follow them, to identify them? People know the cars, they know the people, they know what's happening. Now, what message that sends is that the city is unable to do anything about that. And I think that is absolutely incorrect. The city can do something about it. The question is, why is it not? And so, I think that in this conversation about too much policing, too little policing, I think the fundamental thing that people want is good quality public safety. Does it take more? Does it take less? Does it take more technology? I think those are issues about how you deliver good quality, polite, courteous, knowledgeable, lawful, constitutional, law enforcement, so that you as a citizen do not have to be afraid to live in your house or where your children go. That to me, if we cannot answer this problem, it is a failure for the citizens and the visitors and the workers of our city. So to me, this is an obvious thing that you got to pay attention to and fix. So where's that money? How come it's not used? And how come these mothers are being shot at and everyone knows who's doing it, and there is a failure of response? And I think that is, the first part of what's going on, because it seems to be based in some policy ideas and decisions. When you move, let's say, a mother, you have to move her children. In order to move her children from their schools, you have to have an address where the children are going to go. So all of this seems to be very difficult to coordinate between the managing director's office and the police and the school district, and that seems to be unacceptable problem. So I think that was the first thing I started with. Schools, I think, are another problem. Once again, we are hearing about the fact that in late August, it's hot. You know, you don't have air conditioning. So you know that when you start school at that time, the weather's going to be hot. And if you keep doing this for the next 10 years, you're going to be dismissing children. They're not
Yeah.
dismissed at the same time. They're dismissed at different times. Some schools have air conditioning, some schools don't. So I think its fundamental problem is, if you know you're going to dismiss kids, why did you start before Labor Day? Because we used to not start before Labor Day. Is this just to annoy people? Are you doing this on purpose to tell them the schools need more money? Is this like an intentional thing you do? Is this a disrupt people? I don't know. It's just an odd thing. But yeah, the air conditioning has to be solved, because we cannot do summer learning if children cannot go to school because it's too hot. And we want to do summer learning. I would hope so. I would hope that the school district provides education in the summer. And I don't mean, repetitive education. I mean something they wouldn't get in the normal school year, be it music or art or some type of math or science and technology or something. It's not, summer isn't remedial time. Summer is a good time for children to learn. And I don't think anyone's going to argue that the length of our summer vacations in our school causes children to lose what they've learned and a sense of how you learn. And listen, it's not a problem for wealthy people. It's not a problem for well-educated families and intact families. I mean, it's kind of burdensome, but it's not a problem. It is a problem for children who don't have structure, and that comes from where? Most of the problems in our city have to do with poor neighborhoods that don't have support and things like. So school is a great place for kids. If they're fortunate to have a swimming pool and a gym and air conditioning, even better, physical activity, all the sorts of thing in a safe environment. But then again, we don't have safe environments, right? Some schools have safe environments and others don't. And the policy of the school that allows children who beat physically other children to remain in the school, the beaten children are opting not to go to school. They're opting for online learning if they can, transferring, or what? Are they supposed to just go to school and get harassed and bullied and tortured? Public safety, it's the same problem. So when a child goes to school, they should not be afraid of being shot or beaten on the way to school, and definitely not in school. The abdication of adult responsibility in our schools, you have to provide a safe environment. You cannot say, well, we're going to keep the bullies in because it's better for them. Okay, you're going to have to look at the entire population there. I'm not saying punish children unnecessarily. I am saying you have a priority of your responsibility. There's something you must provide: a safe, clean environment in which to learn and benefit from schooling. So that seems to be a problem. I think the problem is the disconnect between the school district and the community. And I think that is because we have a appointed school board that is appointed by the mayor and that basically has no accountability to the community. And I think if we could have the community elect 5 of those school board members and the mayor appoint 4, we would have, 5 zones where the community will choose who they like best to represent them. I think the far northeast presents a different set of concerns and opportunities than North Philadelphia. And so you can get someone who's more attuned to what needs to be improved, how the community feels, whether or not they want certain types of, like you have a menu of 20 choices. and you're gonna have like 5 choices out of the 20. So some may want more like the building trades type things, or arts, or technology or science, and some may want things that have to do more with like health. But that's a choice they can have. And I think that overall, at least from what I have seen and read and studied about experts who have actually implemented outstanding public school systems in poor communities, there has to be a level of equity and equality. Equity in the sense that you can't have one dilapidated school with no working bathroom and a gorgeous the school with the all kinds of climate control. That's not a right thing to do. But you have to have equality in the sense that the academic choices and the learning choices and the activity choices are equal and similar. And I think someone said to me, like, the problem in Philadelphia is poverty. Yeah, it's a problem, but poverty has not prevented education in other environments. I think a more serious problem, and I'm not saying poverty isn't a problem, is disparity. It is when someone can look across the table and see that the other person has so much more when it is supposed to be equal, and they have so much less. That is very discouraging, creates all kinds of problems. And look, I tell in simple ways, I got 4 kids. If I give 2 of my kids amazing birthday presents, fantastic Christmas presents, and all that, and the other 2 get nothing, I will have 2 messed up kids and 1 messed up family. I will have animosity. I will have, all kinds of like emotional problems, not just from the kids who didn't get anything and feel left out and hated. They will not have a good relationship with their 2 siblings, and the family as a unit will have a problem. We do have to, provide equal opportunity in education. Now, is that so hard to do? And I would say, no, it's not. What's hard to do is to do it in a way that makes every stakeholder happy, and you can't do it. You have to make somebody unhappy if you're going to deliver good education and good opportunities for all the children. And it's not like something we don't know. Any of you can name right now the worst neighborhoods, the most crime-ridden neighborhoods, and they have the worst schools. You can name them, and I can name them, everybody can. The problem is there hasn't been an improvement of those schools. Yes, charter schools have been introduced and unintroduced, I suppose, right? Because now we got the problem of some charter schools, okay, if they're poor performing, that's an issue, but it's not really something I'm very clear on, because I've been to some of the poor performing charter schools. And when it was a public school, the kids were running amok, and there was a lack of attendance, and there was other types of problems. I go to a charter school that is losing its charter, and I see a clean building. I see children wearing jackets, and they're dressed in uniform. They look happy. They seem happy. There's no running around with like yelling, shouting, and cursing. I gotta think that is a contribution. Now, I'm not saying the school district, let's look at the results, but the results overall are not good. My thing is, I don't really believe everything I hear from the school district. And I hear a lot of things, and I know they're not accurate, and I know that they're not correct. I know that public school teachers, some of them, spend their own money to purchase items required by law. And when I asked the school district in budget hearings, they say there's no such thing. Well, I know that, so they know that, right?
Mhm.
But we cannot track those type of things because there's no way to measure it. And I
don't mean to cut you off, Councilman, but
Yeah.
you had legislation
yes,
that would help.
yes, would have tracked it and would have reimburse teachers, and it was based on unspent tobacco settlement money. But
Mhm.
that bill failed. And it's always a mystery to people, like, why does it fail? And again, I bring up that part about what you asked. How is it to be a minority in city council? Sometimes you have good ideas. They are not supported by the stakeholders of education. The teachers, retired teachers, supported it, but the bill did not make it out of committee because there isn't support for it. That's kind of hard for people to understand. How could you, when you're not using tax dollars, you're using available money, you have a system, no politicians involved, you submit your receipts for what you purchase, they have to be required school items. And then it's up to your committee of retired teachers to decide if you spend $1,200, that $800 is reimbursed. But what we get, as I've said before here, we get information that you as a teacher spent $1,200. We get information on what you purchased. We get information that you were reimbursed $800. So at least $800 of it vetted was for required school items. But what was the other $400? Probably for good things for children. So we get to see where teachers are doing this, because they're not doing it in every school. And I'm going to bet, once again, that even in good neighborhoods, there's not enough resources, and in bad neighborhoods, there's a lack of resources entirely. But the inequity, the disparity is what we have to be able to measure and then correct. But if you're unable to correct it because you don't want to make stakeholders unhappy, you will not correct this. But again, I am not part of that group. And so I suffer the consequence of not having a team, but I have the benefits of not being on a team. I'm kind of unconcerned about that team.
I'd like bringing Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Home Monitor.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for spending the time with us, Councilmember.
Yes.
I guess my question for you is, right now, whether we like it or not, we're in the middle of the 2023 mayor's race. Where several of your colleagues are probably going to resign to run for office. One, are you, because usually when it's time for running for city council, there's a whole lot of people running, particularly for at large, but you have a couple of people who are rumored to be running that are district council people. Have you thought about maybe talking to the Republican Party to try to bring more people into the district council fold by having them run for district council?
Not yes and no. Here's what I talk about. People should run. Democrats, independents, everybody run. If you have something to contribute and you want to run, please run. If you have something to contribute and you don't know how to run, you can ask me. I'll tell you. I've done some videos on how to run. And for the Republican Party, if you have good people, please have them run. However, I'm not trying to tell the Republican Party to run some bad candidates and just run people for the sake of running. I think you need good candidates. Now, maybe their definition of a good candidate and my definition, it might be different. But I do encourage not just Republicans to run, but, quite frankly, I have spoken and I do speak with Democrats and, to run. And, I even speak with Republicans who want to run against me. And I tell them, look, here's how you would run. Here's a good way to run. Here's how you get your message out, because I do think we need people to run. And, I'm kind of more a believer that things are going to unfold on their own. And it is better to get a variety of ideas out there. So let's say within the Democratic Party, because that's the biggest party and that's the biggest group of people that's going to get elected, but there's a great variety of opinions. So we're going to have 30 35 people running for city council at large on the Democrat side, and there's only 5 people going to be elected. On the district council side, there's only 1 Republican district council person, and there's 9 Democrats.
Mhm.
And the district that he's in, that being Brian O'Neill, is not one of our more controversial districts with tremendous needs. I mean, they have needs. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying we have some other districts where, you know, the problems are very, very pronounced. And, you know, while the district council person may be doing a good job or a great job, still people should come out and present ideas. If nobody runs against a district council person, if people don't want to come out and challenge the at-large seats, and there are, you know, maybe 2 or 3 open seats in at-large, maybe a couple open seats in the district council. Since I'm a Republican at large and you can run 5, and we typically only had 2, and now we only have 1, there will be 4 challengers. So, you know, I will have 4 challengers, if not more, in the primary. And then in the general, we'll have Work and Families Party, you know, going for 2. And so I always end up with challengers. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't try to avoid challengers. I think it's a good thing. But I think, to get kind of more directly to your point, yeah, the Republican Party has been disappointing in terms of not presenting challengers, you know, in available seats, and even you know, not really very good candidates. Sometimes they're just looking for a body to put up there, and the person is not even running. And I think that really doesn't serve democracy well. So yeah, I do hope that the people will run, but on the Republican side, I hope they will try to find and develop better candidates. And kind of like help them to learn how to run. This is a democratic city. So when you say better candidates, you're also talking about electable. And so if you're running candidates that you're just going to be rejected, those aren't good candidates. So we're not really going to be electing in most of Philadelphia far right candidates. Not going to happen. We're going to be more about more centrist, moderate, you know, candidates. Now, if somebody feels like that's not the Republican Party, okay, well, that's your opinion. It's not my opinion. And, you know, but everybody has a right to their opinion. If you have something to provide to the voters, then go ahead. And quite frankly, we do see it on the Democrat side as well. And I'm not against far left candidates. When I say far left, I'm not talking about off the grid. I'm just saying like very, very left progressive, because, you know, they get elected and they present interesting ideas and possible solutions. And, you know, I work with them as well. So, you know, I do think a good council has a breadth of good ideas. But I think there is a point where hopefully people can try to find the good for the public interest and work together.
Now, you are on the you either chair or you're on the committee about the global economy.
Yes.
How has Pennsylvania benefited from, how's Philadelphia benefited from the global economy? I mean, particularly since you are in a city with the highest poverty rate for a city its size, how can, you know, more access to the global economy help with that?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know that even if they don't see the global economy, they're affected by it. Things that happen someplace else have a direct impact on us, whether it's at the gas pump or the cost of food or the fact that you can't buy a bicycle. You know, those all have to do with the global supply chain. If, for example, in the Ukraine, if they cannot get ships to Africa, there's starvation. I mean, people don't necessarily see how it's connected, but right now, because of fuel cost, shipping and other things, manufacturing may be coming back to America, although it might be robotic, right? It might not involve people, but other things are going to happen as well. But there are opportunities, and the world is changing. And if you don't change with the world, you will be on the bottom of that change, because someone's going to be on top of that change. So one of the things that I think when we talk about benefiting is, in the United States of America, we have not really seen a need to compete. For so many years, we've been, putting a man on the moon and all that stuff, making Cadillacs and color televisions, and we were setting the standard, in the world in almost every way. That's no longer true, but we're still mainly of the mentality that we don't need to fight for it. But you look at cities in the United States that are fighting for it. You look at cities that are big music cities and big art city, and you look at their economies and tourism. You look at Nashville. You look at cities in Texas, and how cities are now competing. But you look globally, because they're taking market share as well of something that we used to take for granted. Every musician pretty much wanted to come to the United States, get the best production, the best engineering, the best market, all that. That's no longer true. And if we take things for granted, we lose the opportunities for our folks. So one of the things that people may not think about when they think about global economy is films, television, and movies. But anyone who looks at Netflix or whatever your provider is, you will find all kind of, like in my day, you had to go to a store, right? TLA or something. And for me, I'd have to go some obscure shelf that said international movies, foreign films. That ain't the case anymore. Young people are growing up watching, television series in Spanish, or, movies from Africa, or mini series from India, right? It's just, that's what they do. And they pick up the music as well. And they don't speak the language, but they can sing the tunes. As other countries were singing our songs in English, not even knowing what it was, right? So this has changed. And if we want to, a lot of that had to do with technology, with Napster, and the fact that, the kind of way that musicians were paid had changed. And so the structure changed, but it didn't change all over the world. And so in certain countries, I could name, for example, like Japan and Korea, they were still selling CDs. But they weren't selling them because they didn't have technology. They had all that technology. It's just that their CDs were more like specialty album covers with, they were like good for giving as gifts. And so gift giving culture, you can't give a Napster song. You can give a $25, bio, photograph, a story, CD, in a beautiful container, right? So they got cash, and with the cash, they got the money to compete with us. And today you can see the effects of K-pop and Korean television series and films and other things. And the technology has allowed, for the graphics and all that to be very competitive. So for us, the opportunities in Philadelphia are not enough. And what I mean is just a local market like Philadelphia. It's not enough for our population. There aren't enough the diversity and variety of jobs and opportunities. Going into a regional economy opens some things up, but it's really when you get into a global economy that we have a lot more opportunities and ways for people to earn. And our population includes tremendously talented people, albeit they don't have a high school degree, even though they didn't graduate from college. Some of it is in lyrics. Some of it is putting their personal perspectives into poetries, and the market may be in China. The money may be coming through that mechanism, right? And what I would say is that, I put together a couple of meetings between our unions in Philadelphia, led by the building trades and the laborers district council, to be exact, and foreign investors. So Japan, Canada, Mexico, China, Korea, Colombia, different countries like that, Panama. Why? Because they want to have their populations here and in their native countries engaged in the new global economy, because things have changed. And we have unions that want to do the work, that want to do the building, that want to receive the investment. And so putting them together, whatever it is you're going to do, let's say you're going to do biotech, or you're going to do some type of communication software, you will do it in a building. Yeah, you can work from home, but when you're at a certain level, you're going to need the top physical environment with the best technology. For example, you could have an excellent university, but you don't have the top laboratories.
Mhm.
And so the researchers will go where the best laboratories are. So for that, you're going to have to build a different skyline. You're going to have to construct all this stuff, and people are going to want to live there. And then the people who work there, they're going to want to live in a city that provides for them. So you, once again, are going to have to do that. So that all has to do with the global economy. And so much of what's going on right now, even the changes in the logistics, means that certain costs are going to go up, and as they're trying to control those costs, they're going to change, for example, where the items are coming from. And by the way, some of that I think is just really a lot of misinformation. For example, when it says made in China, it's not necessarily made in China, because their wages have gone up too, right? So Larry's shaking his head. What happens is, when an order goes to China for X product, they send it to some other country. It could be in Africa, South America, Eastern Europe, wherever they send it to. Could be in the Middle East. And then they get the product with the label made in China, and they send it to what? The United States. It's not actually made in China. That's part of the global economy. Just like when we manufacture cars in like Tennessee or someplace, it's like a Toyota or a Honda made in the United States with all US people, but the parts come from all over the world, wherever that is, global supply chain. So the idea of a global economy is not kind of a foreign thing. It is a today thing, happens all the time. However, what we're not doing in Philadelphia is we're not looking at it intentionally and purposefully. And what that means is there's a lot of human beings who are left on the side of the road. And the more that we understand that we're in a global economy, the more opportunities there are for our creative, innovative people, our people with, diverse perspectives and ability to connect to, to consumers around the world and things like that. So that's how it could. Now, the problem again is, we've not put a lot into our global economy effort. We just haven't. I mean, honestly, I've been to other cities, and a lot of people in our city have been, but not as part of city government. They've done it for their companies, for their businesses, for their universities and institutions. But our city as a government must be engaged to do this type of effort. So, when we look at, for example, Chicago did a $60 million arts recovery fund. New York City's, arts and culture budget is something like $200 million. Our actual city budget is 4.2, and it was cut to zero by the mayor, as you recall. And some of it was put back in by council, and then council got its own budget under the new normal budget, which means that council now gave itself money to hand out. We're not the mayor, we're not the administration, but now we're giving out money. And so, but when you look at the actual budget, it's the same. There's been no more money put in it, 4.2 million, let's say. That's minuscule budget for something so impactful in our city. Eds and meds, arts and culture, right? It's a big economic engine. I throw the numbers out for those who don't know it. 3.4 billion in economic impact, $920 million in household income annually, 157 million in local taxes for all the things that we need, including schools and picking up the trash on time and, making sure it's COVID safe and dealing with potholes and roads and parking and policing and all those type of things. So why would we neglect something that has been so badly damaged, because COVID means everything shut down and, the whole ecosystem was extremely disrupted. And we got money, 1.4 billion from the federal government to stimulate the economy, which went into the city's deficit. So we're not stimulating the economy. And other than talking about the arts and the creative arts economy, there's no resources for it. So it's still a pitiful, a pitifully poorly funded, fantastic economic engine. And we will start losing people. We've lost venues, we've lost, if we don't revive this, aspect of our city, we may lose and not be able to recover from that.
Now, you're talking about arts and culture and the creative economy, but you're also talking about it in the poorest big city of its size in America. What you're saying about the revenue that it produces is good and it makes sense, but how do you make it make sense to people who are just trying to live?
Yeah, it makes sense. In other words, we just had a fashion hearing, and the fashion hearing, it's big business and we have national people involved, but the fashion task force is chaired by two African-American gentlemen. And they have their own, they're the creators of Philly Fashion Week. And a lot of the fashion that they deal with, there's small batch manufacturing, there's universities, but there's urban fashion. And a lot of young people are very attracted to fashion. And so when you go to the poorest communities in our city, we have fashion, but they need a platform, an opportunity. They may need some education, some training. I was just at Thomas Jefferson University, what was formerly Philadelphia University, with their dean, looking at, what they're producing fashion-wise, their students, in their design schools and things like that. So there is what people want to do and they can do. And in our poorest communities, that is a problem. It is challenging to become a doctor. It is challenging to become a lawyer, though they do. But a lot of young people, they're into the music, the filmmaking, the writing, the acting, the computer and all those type of things. They enjoy it, they play with it, they want to do it. They need better instruction, but there is money in it for them. And so I think that even though there's been many efforts to get young people in poor communities to travel up to the Northeast to do programs, free programs in construction, in plumbing and things like, you can't get them there. Why? Because they're young and they don't want to. Just like when we were young and we just didn't want to, right? We all remember that. You could be blue in the face telling about how much money you can make and all, yeah, but they're not doing it. But you give them an opportunity to get into a music studio or to, they're there, and they're there on time and they're there with tremendous interest. That is not a waste of their time. They may not end up in front of the camera or on the stage, but they'll end up going to school, learning, not being on the street, not getting engaged and distracted in bad behavior or being victimized by it. So much of what is in a poor community is just the depressed human spirit. They don't see the hope. They don't see the concern. They don't see that anyone tried to give them an opportunity or cared enough to give them parameters and discipline, because you cannot succeed just running amok. You know, if you want to play the piano, you're going to have to sit down and start with the scales. If people don't want to give you those parameters and guidelines, if they don't want to help you get that discipline, 5 years later, you will not be the pianist you could have been. And I think that is a problem in how our city deals with the poorest communities. You know, the idea that you don't provide discipline, you don't give correct feedback, like everything has to be positive encouragement despite they're doing everything wrong. I think that's tremendously misleading. And I find that to be a problem in our city. And I see that, in my opinion, I think you'll find that young people reject that. It's pandering, it's patronizing, it's lack of quality, and quite frankly, you wouldn't do it to your own children. And I think the children understand that. They want to be treated the way you would treat your children, I would treat my children. And sometimes, sometimes, and I'm sorry to say this, but I just think, at one point in time, having that father figure or that strong adult figure or that caring mother figure, that was something kids really were attracted to in a lot of our neighborhoods. I would say, I don't think that those images are received the way they used to be. I think there is a lot of real resentment to the failings of adults in these communities. And when someone tries to play that father role, you better watch out. Like it's not something to show up and like pretend like I'm here and I'm an adult, I'm the father figure. You'll be met with a lot more than just anger. And that's the very violent nature of what we're dealing with. But I think you can come in with fashion, you can come in with music, you can come in with something they really want. And so I think the opportunities that are presented through the creative economy in particular is something very helpful to addressing that disparity and neglect and just what young people actually want in those very depressed, hopeless situations.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Councilmember Oh. I really appreciate it. I'm going to turn it back over to Larry McGlynn, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WBPM.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Councilman, what do you think the city should do with its budget surplus?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't have a budget surplus. And I don't mean, like we got, as I said, 1.4 billion to stimulate the economy. That didn't go there. We do need to provide public safety. Public safety, people trapped in their homes, kids being unsafe to even use public transportation or even play a video game in their home. I mean, that is horrendous. We do have to, make this city safe so that people can go about their business and enjoy the quality of life wherever they are. But, since we have this surplus, I think it should not be treated like it was a windfall. It's not a windfall. It's things that we fail to do. It's over taxation. One of the biggest problems I have with this city are the property assessments. And I know people say like, listen, my property assessments are fair and I want to pay more taxes. Well, go ahead, do it. But don't say that for people who are going to lose their homes. Don't say that for people who have those horrible schools and can't step out their house and stand at a bus station. No, they are suffering under an assessment that is plaguing their neighborhoods. It's overly high, it's unjustified, and that is what is leading to this gentrification in its worst sense. What I'm saying is, you're pushing people out of house and home, and they know that too. And add that to the violence, add that to the resentment. So where is this surplus coming from? I mean, the idea that city government is going to do good things with this money, I think, I would really push back against that idea. the city government has failed in many ways that are very obvious that we see. I do think there's a point where city government should have the money, should be responsible, transparent, and accountable for what it does. But I think, we have to leave the money in the pockets of people. They too make decisions, and they are closer to ground on what they need in their house or in their block or in their neighborhood. They too pool their money. They too make charitable contributions. These are things that when the government has more money than it needs, and it never has enough money, it seems, for everything it wants to do. But when you're taking that from the people and they are in debt and debt and debt, and the consequence is that the government will now come in and take from them. It's not like this is free. Like, you don't pay your taxes, you're gonna have a sheriff's sale upon you. So what should they should return some of that money. They shouldn't have it in the first place. If you're going to do something with that money, do it now. Like, basically, you have to repair the neighborhood life. That means it has to be safe. You have to repair the fact that we need tourists in this town. A part of our ability to pay for people's needs comes from people who don't live in Philadelphia, having a hotel night, going to a restaurant, tipping people, going to a concert, paying for things, and paying all those taxes. I mean, we do need them here. It is part of the basis of an economy of any major urban, city. And quite frankly, the wealthier the people, the better. They come in and spend more money than you or I could, and they leave a lot more money here happily and move on to their way. Come into our city. I do think that we have to focus on the future economy of the city. And I think a lot of people don't talk about that in government. There's a lot of things we're talking about, but that's not one of them. At a certain point, people will not have jobs. They will not have employment that matches the expenses. They won't have a future. The economy is tremendously important, and eventually people will go to that city or that location that is best suited for them. Maybe you're going to go to a part of Pennsylvania or some other place where the cost of living is low, the quality of life is good, and you're going to work from home. Maybe you're going to go to a place where the wages give you more money than the expenses, and you enjoy the weather and everything else. I mean, we are competing in terms of location. And if we are not competitive, for those people who don't know or who can't leave, you're stuck in this town. And this town can't provide because it doesn't have the resources. This town does have to have people that are earning money, people that are happy, people that feel they're living a worthwhile life. And because of that, we are able to provide them clean streets, nice parks and open spaces, stimulating things like museums and other things, top level technology, and all the other things. And part of it, when you're in a city, is the variety of people who come in here to study, to play, to vacation, to be our fellow workers or things like that. So that to me, there's some correcting that needs to happen in our city government. I think, the COVID has been very bad for city government, mainly because it's been shut down. People haven't been coming to work. They've been, absent from the functions of the city. And, quite frankly, I think city council is way past the time it should have in-person hearings and let the public come in and let them say what they have to say to us, because they got a lot to say. And, that's one of the nice things about council. You can come in and yell at your council people, and we really can't stop you. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think problematically, it's been like a couple of years and everything has been virtual. And for those who have not actually had the experience of people coming in and sometimes 400 or 500 of them, it's a very important experience when you're going to be responsive to people.
So the last thing I'd like to ask you is, you know, whether we like it or not, we are in the election season for the new mayor.
Yes.
Kind of officially started. What are the qualities you are looking for in a new mayor?
I'm looking for someone who can present some very practical things, like, what are you going to do with the police? Are you going to actually improve the quality of the policing? Are you going to improve the responsiveness? Do you believe that visible community policing prevents crime, or do you believe that police only come after crime is committed? Do you believe that there are functions that the police are doing, like L&I type functions, that should be done by L&I who don't work after 5 o'clock, that should work after 5? Are you only enforcing things in this city upon law-abiding citizens, but you're letting speakeasies and drug deals and bootleg cigarette? Are you just doing that, and then all night parties go on? Like, what are you doing about the economy? What do you think about the tax structure? Do you think people can actually pay these taxes? What are you doing about the things that lift people up, or what is going to be in your library? What can an adult do? What can a senior do? Like, I want to know who you're going to put in charge. I'd like to know what person is it that's going to turn these things around on your team, and where is this money going to come from? Are you just going to tax people more and more as they have less and less? What are you going to do about the schools? Quite frankly, again, schools are very important. We don't run the schools, but we're very much related. And the mayor, has tremendous influence over the schools because of his appointments. Are you going to say that I am accountable and responsible for the schools? Or are you going to say, like, hey, listen, I made appointments. They're a different branch of government, and because that's been the history in Philadelphia. Or are you going to say, I am going to be hands-on in the school district. I know I don't run it. I'm going to make my appointments. I'm going to give people their say. I'm going to make it responsive. There shall be no hiding. And if the schools fail, I fail. Like, are you going to do that? Are you going to step up in there? I think there's so many things that can be done. Mayor, can you tell us about air conditioning? Here's a simple one. Yeah, here's my plan for air conditioning. Okay, here's the money, here's what I'm going to do, so forth and so on. Now that I have put air conditioning in the schools, like, at a certain point in time, it seems like the cost of maintaining these buildings is more than building a new one. How much money have we put into asbestos removal and are putting back in? Like, is this going to be like a cash cow for folks? And there's these buildings, like, if you can use them, well, use them. But if you can't, come up with a plan and take care of them. Like, I don't think these are like super difficult things for someone to answer. What I don't see is a very simple answer. Look at our Commerce Department. Isn't that important? The mayor cut the budget in half. What does that say about commerce? What is that, like? Or there weren't qualified people in there? Like, what is the problem with the Commerce Department? Where is the international? Where is the live music and the creative arts economy for real? I mean, yeah, we have some titles with people who have no staff. Those are all fake. And we have a lot of fake things. By the way, what are you going to do about Kensington? Kensington, I think, is an example of bad policies that people are not responsible for, and a failure of leadership. Now, if you like Kensington, say so. I like Kensington. I like what we're doing. We're going to keep doing it. Good. You've said so. Now, if you don't like Kensington, what are you going to do about it? Because here's what I would do. Here's what you would do. How come our mayoral candidate cannot articulate what they're going to do? They're going to do everything, which means they're going to do nothing. We're going to care for those in need. We're going to take care of the vulnerable. We're going to respond to the residents. We're going to make sure the children are safe. We're going to create a safe environment. We're not going to over police. We're not going to, you're going to do so many things. You can't do anything, because that is the problem in Kensington. You're going to please everybody, which means you're doing nothing. So you're overrun. with drug addicted people that you cannot support, you cannot help, you cannot sustain. These are things that are just not going to work. So you're procrastinating and putting off and denying. And what you got is a horrendous situation in Kensington of just accumulated human misery in every which way. And again, I have to remind people that the problems in Kensington, you know, you can start it in Mexico, where 18,000 people were murdered, you know, related to the drug trade, that ultimately a lot of it comes up here into Philadelphia. And so it's not just about, you know, the person on the street who's injecting. It's about a lot of people, including those people who are selling and killing each other because of the huge amount of money they can make, and about those juveniles prostituting themselves every day, you know, to get that money. I mean, that is a huge problem. And the mayor is going to have to solve that problem. And what I see is they don't want to say how they're going to solve it, which means you're not going to solve it. So tell us how you're going to solve it, and then people can vote for or against you. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see very practical answers given in a very honest and frank way. And obviously, you're going to make a lot of people unhappy with your answers. That's how you know it's a real answer.
All right. Well, Councilmember David Oh, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay.